Hello, this is Lynn Fraser. I'm really happy to be here doing another relaxation and inquiry with Halifax Pride. When I came out in the 70s, it was a very different environment. And it's just really exciting to see the changes over the years, and not to be a Pollyanna about that either. I know that there's still lots of issues and lots of bullying and conditioning around who we are. And I thought maybe we could explore identity a little bit in this session. So let's kind of start with tuning into our body. We always want to be aware of our body as we're doing a practice, and as we're doing, and we always want to be aware of our body anyway, but especially when we're doing a practice. So just to come in and notice what's going on in your system right now. We might be a little excited. I'm excited and happy to be here. You might have all kinds of other questions in your mind or thoughts in your mind. What is it about our identity? And how do we know that we're not heterosexual, cisgendered, whatever that is? How do we know we're queer? I identify as a lesbian. How do we know who we are? So one of the things that's really interesting to me is the options and the different ways that people have to talk about this now. When I was growing up in a small town in Saskatchewan in the middle of Canada in the 50s and 60s, I actually didn't know that there was such a thing as a lesbian. I kind of had an idea that there was gay guys because I had a friend who was one, and they were a little bit more visible, but I didn't actually know until a little bit later that was even an option. So that really changed the way I identified. So now at least there's this broad range of ways and people and resources that we can look at. And people are talking about it now. There's after Ellen is one of the terms that we sometimes use of, when Ellen DeGeneres came out and all of a sudden people were talking about it, people at my office were talking about it. And, it's just, were we out, were we not out? We had to be really strategic about that. And to some extent, that's still the case now too. But if we bring it right into our personal situation and identity, maybe just to take a moment and think back to what were some of the early signs for you that you're, however you might, whatever words you might use to identify, what were some of the early words for you, or early signs for you that you're queer or somewhere in the 2S LGBTQ plus identity community? How did you know, and how old were you? What was going on then? Was it sudden? Was it something that's just like, oh, that was the way it was for me? I just kind of all of a sudden got it. Oh, that's what's going on. So for me, it wasn't really a long, slow process. I could look back and see there was some process going on. But in terms of my identifying, it was just like, oh, okay, that's it. So what was that like for you? And when you first came out, however, that process was going, was it a process that you were very well supported in? Was it something that you had to really hide? And for most of it was probably some of each. We could be really out in some settings, and there's other times when we might have felt like we weren't really so welcome to show up as who we really were. And sometimes I know for sure there's danger. We have to sometimes be careful about who knows, because there could be some kind of physical danger, or we could get, not promoted at work. There's a lot of ways that discrimination and prejudice work. But what were some of the fun things about that too? Like when you first went to something, or you first told somebody, you first went to a bar where you could be around other people. I remember that was just so exciting because I just felt like I was home. Like these were my people. And I hadn't really ever felt that before. I'd always felt kind of different. And I didn't know why. I didn't have any of the details about that. So these are some of the things that a lot of us really experience as we're on this journey of coming out to ourselves, to other people. So can you kind of just tune into that for a moment? What was really exciting as you were coming out? And maybe you're just in that process now and it's still really heady, it's still really exciting, and we feel really connected, which we all really need. Let's take some deep breaths and notice how that feels in your body, what's coming up in your mind. And one of the ways that our society works is that we're conditioned. We're conditioned into believing certain things are true. So if you had an environment where it was very open and accepting, so for instance, in my son's family, it's always been fine for the children to be whatever, express however they are, to have whatever identities they have around this. There was never any shaming of, well, you don't want to dress up as a girl and wear makeup for Halloween. It was always just fine. There was no issues there. So that might not be the situation. I'm for sure it's not the situation for everybody. So what was your situation? And how much support did you have? And who was it from? Maybe there was somebody in your family or in your friendship group where you could kind of be who you really were. And what did that feel like? It's wonderful when we can just kind of relax and just really let people in. We don't have to, the pronoun game when I was working earlier in my life was, you'd talk about what you did on the weekend, but it was, well, yeah, we all went camping, or they, or, it in a different way, using they, them than what it's used now. But there was a hiding or a being in the closet about that. And sometimes I would do that just because it wasn't worth it to me to kind of come out. And I don't really have a visible look like a lesbian necessarily, although I did more when I was younger. But how can we just kind of notice that? What does it feel like to have to hide or have to manage that? So sometimes I would I had a button that said lesbian mother. I almost got beat up one time because this guy at a store that I was in looked and saw, I had the jean jacket, my head was almost shaved. And I was kind of pretty obvious at that point that I wasn't just some kind of sweet little heterosexual woman. And he looked at the button and he got really mad and he almost punched me. And I'm just like, fuck off, get out of my face. And I don't care what you think. This is me. But when I see that too, there was a bit of a fight response there. It's like, I've had it with people telling me who I am and identifying for me who I am. I get to decide that. And you don't get to have a vote on that. But then it also takes a certain amount of energy to mark out that territory for ourselves, to say that, to have to be correcting assumptions of other people. So how we move about in the world is complicated, especially if we have an identity that we know isn't welcome everywhere. So one of the things that we do as a queer community is we create a community where we feel safer with each other and we can be who we are. So let's take several minutes now just to kind of tune into that. We'll come back into our body. Take some deeper breaths. Notice what's here. And notice your feet, your seat. Notice if you look around the room that you're in right now, we're all in different locations, but notice if you feel safe where you are right now. So right now, you're not having to defend yourself. You're listening to this practice. You can look around. You could also look behind you if you want. Just let your eyes take in that you're safe right here. And something that happens sometimes too is that our nervous systems get kind of alarmed. So you could hold your own hand. You could just kind of give yourself that support of holding your own hand. You could take some deeper breaths. And so for a few minutes, we'll just kind of review what comes up in your body as you're thinking about and remembering, and really looking at, how did I know? What were some of the earlier things? Was it really hard with everybody, or who was it that I could really get together with my friends at school who knew who I was and who accept me? Or, maybe I had a cool grandma like my grandson has, who he doesn't have to hide with. So just to notice these things. What is here? And sometimes there's a flurry of thoughts going on in our mind. And one way that we can work with that is to do just a simple tapping practice. We just take two fingers and tap gently on our forehead. And it kind of reminds us that we're here, that we're in a body, that we're not back in an argument with somebody. We can just help that regulate our system and help us to calm down. So if there's a lot of kind of alarming thoughts in the mind, or abuse or damaging things or memories, come back into this moment in time. Let yourself be really settled here. And then bring to mind with some vividness. So use your senses to bring to mind some wonderful experiences of being out and being accepted and being connected, and really feeling like you're aligned with who you are. What does that feel like? And maybe it's that you come into the room and a friend is there, and you look at each other and you're happy to see each other. So there's no hiding. You don't need to worry about what they think about you. You just really like each other. And maybe it's a group of people and you feel at home. And sometimes when we think about that, we could take a few deeper breaths. We can let our body relax. It's pretty cool to be able to be who we are and to really sink into that. Even when other people might shame us, and there are some people who would definitely deny us our human rights. Some people would be violent with us. So there's all of that here too. And it's a really exciting time right now to be able to look into this. So, some of this is gender roles and gender conditioning. And I'm really interested as some of that fades away and some of that toxic masculinity isn't so predominant. I don't think we're really there yet on that one. But what is it that people are going to want to express? So I know for me, it's very different than it is for people who are younger. And the conditioning is a little bit different. There's more freedom. And I'm an old activist as well. So, there was freedom back then. It was just it was different. But if you had no influences against what you feel, your sexual orientation, your identity, your gender, your gender identity, all of that that's related to this. If you had no negative influences and you could just express exactly as you are, what might that look like? Would you dress different? Would your body language be different? If you knew that you could just walk around being who you are and you would be accepted, that would just be a non-issue. And what would that be like? You'd never have to correct pronouns because people would just automatically respect what you wished. You wouldn't have to be the the one gay friend that proves that they're not homophobic. You could just be accepted and be friends with people who like you, not just who are using you kind of as a way to prove that they're cool. So just to sit with that, what does that feel like in your body if you could be exactly who you are? And we actually didn't have to fight for that. It would just be kind of normal. What might change? What might you be able to bring forward and express? One thing that we know is that there's a lot of shaming that goes on around our sexuality, around our bodies. And this isn't completely just a queer issue. It's for everybody in some senses, but there's a very specific way it happens for us. And especially if you've had any kind of a religious background, there can be a real fear of, I'm going to go to hell if because of who I am, there's something really fundamentally wrong with who I am deep inside. And even if there's not any religious kind of influencing around that, there's still the general culture that can be not very accepting and not very validating. So we might be tolerated. So that's better than not being tolerated, but it's not really a wholehearted welcoming and accepting either. So before we finish this practice, I just thought it might be helpful for us to look and see, is there any internal shaming going on? Are there any core deficiency beliefs about there's something wrong with me? And it's hard not to have some elements of that with the culture that we live in. And so it might be almost nothing. It might be something that's a big source of suffering. So if you were to check back in with your body, did your body tighten up? Did you start holding your breath? So when we go from imagining and kind of thinking about what would my life and expression of my gender and sexuality be like if I wasn't being pressured by culture? So if we go from that to looking at, is there any residual shaming here? It can have an effect on our body. So one of the ways that we work with that is we take some deeper breaths. We relax our shoulders again. And then let's take a few minutes to do a kindness and compassion practice with ourselves. You could have your hands on your heart if you want. So you could look at whatever comes up right now. There might be thoughts in the mind. There might be something that's up, and you could look at that. Or you could just look at, I'm fine with who I am. I don't have any shame about who I am. And then notice if there's a response, does that feel really true? So sometimes you don't get to decide. So we have kind of a fight response around that. You don't get to tell me I'm wrong. But we might or might not still have some feeling of there's something wrong inside. So there's two levels here. One is the shaming that somebody else might do. And we can work with that in a little bit of a different way. But just deep inside, if you were to say, I really love myself, I accept myself, I feel free to express myself. I might, depending on your age and your circumstance, you might have to, be a bit strategic about that right now. But really fundamentally, I feel like I'm okay as a person. My identity is fine. I like myself. I like being the way I am. And there's nothing I want to change about that. At my core, I really love and accept myself. And notice your body and your breath, and just let that kind of reverberate for a little bit. I really love and accept myself just as I am. And what might come in is experiences that we've had of people judging us. Maybe it's somebody in our family or at work or at school or somebody else just out and about. I mean, we're not trying to pretend that everybody is okay with this. So we might have memories and traumatic memories that are stored in our body about people who've judged us. But that's different. It can definitely make us feel like there's something wrong with us. But we can put them over there. That's not their business to define who we are. It's our business to define who we are. And we can do that in our community, and we can do it in our own hearts. So let's finish with that. Let's for another several breaths. I love myself exactly as I am. I love who I am. And really offer yourself your own love and compassion and kindness. And what would that be like if you were just unconditionally kind with yourself? It's really hard being a human being. And it's even harder in many ways if we're not part of what the dominant culture defines as acceptable. So if we're somewhere on that, in that community of queer, non-binary, however we might define ourselves as that, wherever we are in that it's okay for us to just really acknowledge that some people might shame us for that, but we don't have to take that on ourselves, that we could keep working with accepting and loving ourselves as we are. And finding our people so that we can get that reflected back to us. That's really important too. So notice what got stirred up during that practice. It's an inquiry practice. So just to notice what might have come up. We can always work with these things later. To really stay grounded in your body, just notice your body, your breath. Relax your forehead, your mouth and jaw, neck and shoulders. Let your body settle. Take some deep breaths. I like myself just as I am. And let yourself feel that for a moment. I like myself just as I am. And then when you're ready, finish the practice.